Okay, well, thank you everyone again for joining us on this Friday afternoon. I'm very excited to be introducing our speaker today. It's none other than Professor Johnny van der Berg, whom I'm sure many of you know already. For those who don't, Professor van der Berg is manager of the IPM program in the Unit of Environmental Sciences and Management at Northwest University, and he has nearly 4 decades of experience in management of grain crop pests. And today he's going to share some of that knowledge with us, focusing, of course, on integrated pest management. So clearly we are in for a great session. Just before I hand over to Prof. Johnny, some house rules. Please add any comments or questions in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the session. We have disabled the mics for the participants just to ensure a good flow of events, but you are more than welcome to add anything in the comments section and we'll get to those at the end of the session. For those who are participating in the CropLife CPD program, the assessment will be available on the CPD system in category 1 of the online modules. Okay, so thanks so much, Professor, for taking the time to speak to us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to everybody. It's nice to see it's 99 people on the online at the moment. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch off my camera. So I'm going to present on the principles of integrated pest management today. And in this process, I want to deal with a little bit of the theory behind IPM. I'm sure all of the people online are experienced in this field, have heard about it, have learned about it, but I want just to review some basic principles before I get to examples that I'm going to deal with about bollworm in maize and soybean pests and cutworm management. And all of this eventually has this benefit of insect resistance management in the end, which of course is a priority for the industry at the moment. So I would like to start off with some theory behind integrated pest management. So the aim of an IPM strategy is to apply pest management in order to reduce populations and to maintain them at levels below those that cause economic injury. And it's important also to say what IPM is not. IPM does not mean that insecticides must not be used. And IPM is not a method or a recipe. It is a way to think about how to control pests. And IPM doesn't mean biocontrol only. It doesn't mean organic farming. It just means you need to think and plan to do a good job in managing pests. So what is IPM? The basis of an integrated pest management system is that there's a strong emphasis on decision making, and it's based on monitoring data. If we don't measure, we don't know. And biological and cultural control is the default positions before we get to chemical control with products that has low environmental impact if they are available. So I always say that IPM stands on 4 pillars: biological control, chemical control, cultural control, and genetics or host plant resistance. And this is where I would include genetically modified BT crops, of which we have some grain crops in South Africa. But IPM is knowledge intensive, like you'll see with the examples I'm going to present. And to do good IPM, you need to be able to sample accurately. There needs to be economic thresholds. You need to know the biology and the ecology of the pest. And I would just like to begin with the principle of the economic injury level. Like everything in life, living organism population densities, except humans, of course, goes up and down over time. This can be within a cropping season. It can be with over a year and or over cropping seasons. And then we get years when, in this case, pest numbers increase drastically. So every population fluctuates around a general equilibrium And then we have this principle of the economic injury level, the red line. And at that level of population density, the cost of control will equal the loss that a farmer will suffer with his crops. Now, the economic threshold level, that's a scientifically developed level or determined level. Now, in order to prevent pest populations from reaching that injury level, there is an economic threshold level. And if we apply pest management or chemical control, the pest population usually crashes and then it continues at a lower equilibrium level. So we can manage pests at a low level through the 4 pillars of integrated pest management. And that is the basis of everything. So I've got a lot of text here, but then this is the last one. There's so much text. So the economic injury level is the level or the population density where the cost of control of the pest equals the economic loss. So it's not cost effective to control when the population reaches the injury level. So the threshold level is the pest density at which you need to start actions to control the pest. And we also refer to the economic threshold level as the action threshold level. Unfortunately, in South Africa, there are very few threshold levels, especially in the extensive crops. So there are different approaches to integrated pest management in high and in low value crops. For example, in the Western Cape, in fruit production systems compared to the grain production systems. And because of my background with grain crops, in this presentation, I will focus on grain crops. And I think the crop protection workers working with citrus and macadamia and all the soft fruits are much more advanced in terms of IPM, the practice thereof compared to the grain crops. And there are many reasons for that, but we can't discuss that due to a lack of time. So the components of an IPM strategy, as I indicated, is plant resistance and biological control, cultural control, and chemical control. But to do this well, we need to trap and monitor. We need to check the weather. We need to check if there are alternate host plants, and there need to be thresholds. And if we can incorporate these 4 pillars, we can reduce pest populations to the levels we want, low levels. And through that, the aim of IPM is to have an economic farming system, and it must be environmentally sustainable. And I want to apply everything I just indicated here today when we talk a little bit about cutworms and also about soybean pests. Now, in order to be able to apply the principles, we need to monitor pest numbers, and I'm sure all of you are involved in this. And we need to have record keeping, which is critical, through scouting, through traps, etc. And the way in which we monitor, and I find that this is an aspect that is neglected in the pest management industry in South Africa, is monitoring. Because animal populations have different distribution patterns. It can be a regular distribution, uniform, or random, or clumped. And in most cases, insect pests have clumped distribution. So that's why monitoring needs to be done in an appropriate manner. And I'm giving here an example of, let's say, a maize field, where the green lines representing a maize row. So there needs to be a predetermined way of sampling and monitoring for, let's say in this case with maize, that number of infested plants in a certain transect or so. And this is the way you should go about it. That is random sampling. Crossing a few rows, checking if a plant is infested. Crossing a few rows, checking if another plant is infested. This is accurate sampling. What happens in the field, and I'm sure many of you, of course, not you that are listening, everybody else knows people that do this. If you are an insecticide salesman, you take the farmer to that spot and tells him how heavy the infestations are. And a week later, you come back after you've sprayed and you go to this area here and you show him that the pesticide worked very well. So monitoring in an appropriate way is very, very important. And I want to give you another example, and that's why we need to integrate and think about this in an integrated way. This is an example of an actual data of a maize field, the field with on which different pests were monitored. This is corn earworm, or similar to bollworm, and you can see the density of the pest here. The dark green, there was nothing, and then the yellow means there were many of them. So you can see the edge effect, and that's why we shouldn't always monitor or count on the sides of the field. So this bollworm, you can see its yellow distribution. Maize weevils, you can see again the yellow on the sides there. Stink bugs, you can see the dark brown. They're always on the edges. Look here. And aflatoxin, or that comes from the fusarium, you can see the edge effect here. There we have that associated nogal with the stink bugs, again on the edge. So monitoring is important. And this is another example of the edge effect and why accurate assessment of infestation levels are important. It shows the distribution of Tuta absoluta eggs, the tomato leaf miner, distribution of eggs in 19 different tomato fields. And you can see that the dark color is the high infestation, always on the edge of a field is a very high infestation of Tuta. So no recommendation regarding chemical control can be done if you only do the sampling on the side of the field. So it brings me back to the 4 pillars of IPM and to the knowledge intensiveness of this business we are dealing with. And I want to give examples of IPM now. And I want to integrate those 4 pillars in the examples I want to give you. And of course, we cannot use all 4 of them in every case we need to manage. We must pick what's available and incorporate that in an integrated pest management system. So I want to deal with landscape level IPM, and I want to give an example of Tuta, but then focus on bollworms in maize and soybean, and a little bit about cutworm management. And I said in the beginning, integrated pest management and insect resistance management goes hand in hand. And we need to protect the chemistry that we have in the country. Terbifos was just banned, I think in this week, last week, and there are many other insecticides or chemistry, fungicides included, that will not be available in a year or 2 from now. So if pests evolve resistance against more and more of these products, we will end up in a dire situation in a few years from now. In this picture, I showed to you, and that's what I mean by landscape level IPM. What I mean by that is that we should not focus only on a field with a pest. In this case, we have potatoes and tomatoes, And we have the same pest complex, tuta leaf miner and potato tuber moth, very closely related species, the same genus actually. What happens, and especially in the Limpopo province, from experience, we see tomatoes are cultivated very close to potatoes. And when tomatoes are sprayed many times during the season, well, it sounds like a disco with all these people coming in. When tomatoes are sprayed with pesticides against tuta, and after harvest, the moths fly to adjacent potato fields, lay their eggs there, and the pest is just sprayed with the same insecticides on the potato field, and vice versa. And we need to start thinking at a landscape level of how we're going to manage pests, because we've got, and everybody knows of the issues about insecticide resistance in these two crops. And that's why we need to do integrated pest management. And of course, Laryomyza and whitefly also, but on both crops. We need to address that in a way. But I want to start with examples of IPM, how we incorporate different pillars and the economic threshold concept. And the first one is bollworm in maize. And this is the type of damage that bollworms cause. You can see the maize ear. And the bollworm larvae, usually, I would say 99% of the time, feeds on the tips of maize ears. You can see in all these pictures. And there's some silk of the maize ear that was damaged by this bollworm larvae. So what is the threshold for bollworm control in maize? When should you say, yes, we will spray? What would the recommendation be? Now, this is one of those cases where there is no threshold. And in South Africa, chemical control of bollworm is hardly ever warranted economically. Because in terms of IPM, and this is bollworm in maize and sorghum and groundnut, probably the most common inquiries that we get in our IPM group. Should we spray or not? Now, the IPM way of thinking about this, okay, there's no threshold, so what are the guidelines? Weather is critical in terms of the decision that we always make. We can also ask what development stage is the ear in, and then is there nuclear polyhydrosis virus present in the field? And it's very easy to spot. If you look at this larvae on this plant, is a bollworm larvae that is infected by the virus, and it occurs naturally. But there are also, I think, a commercial product available now in the fruits industry where you can buy virus to apply to kill bollworm. So what we say in terms of an IPM recommendation to farmers that inquire whether they should control or not, we always say if the humidity is high, the temperatures are high, and it looks like rain, and if you see 2 or 3 dead larvae in a field, we know that when humidity increases drastically, especially if there's a rainy period coming, that the virus will spread like wildfire, and they would dissipate the whole population if within 2 or 3 days. And I have had numerous experiences of farmers calling me back and saying we were decided to spray on Friday, but we waited till Monday and there are no bollworms left. That is what integrated pest management means. So in this case, there is no threshold to guide our decision, but we've got expert opinion that can guide us in terms of that. So it was not the use of chemistry as first option in this case. Another example, and this is an excellent example of how we should think about whether we should spray or not is soybean pests. Now, as you're looking at this picture, I want to ask you guys to think about it. This is a soybean field, and you see the defoliation that Lepidoptera larvae lupus caused. If you were the crop protection hotline, and the farmer phoned and said, should I spray? Or if you are the representative in the field, should I spray this soybean field for lepidopteran pests right now? What would you say? Yes or no? Of course, first, this looks terrible. First instinct is spray as soon as possible. But I want to take you through the IPM way of thinking here. Soybean can tolerate 30% leaf loss during the vegetative stage before flowering, and then 15% leaf loss when the plant has started to flower and the pods form. So that is already a threshold that can guide our decision to spray or not. Now, I want you again to take a guess. If you look at these leaves, take a guess. What is the percentage leaf loss that you see here? Is it 10%, 30%, 90%? What would you say? And I'm going to give you 5 seconds of quiet. And then let's say, okay, guess what the leaf loss on that leaf is. Is it 10%, 20, 40, and 90? No, it's not. And I want to, okay, good answers there. Thanks for that answer in the chat box, but that is not correct. The reason why I'm showing you this is to illustrate the anxiety we experience when we see damage like this. And that guides the way in which we make decisions. Now, those are not the real levels of yield loss, of leaf loss. These are the levels of yield loss. And remember what I said that plants can tolerate 30% leaf loss in the vegetative stage. And this is what it looks like. So basically, if I had to give a recommendation, if leaves look like this, that way, I would say, no, you don't need to spray for lepidopterans in the vegetative state. And there are programs on the internet available where you can teach yourself to rate this type of thing, because it's difficult if you don't have any experience to do that. So why am I showing you this? We need to think and not panic before we make a decision on whether to use chemistry in this particular case. So this was an example of an IPM way of thinking in terms of soybean leaf defoliators. And the reason why it's important to realize this compensation aspect of plants, or the tolerance, I mean, is this concept of the generalized response curve. One pest individual, one worm or one larva doesn't equate to 1 unit of damage or 1 unit of yield loss. So it's not a straight line relationship between the number of insects on a plant and the yield of the plant. It is a non-linear relationship. We can any plant, every plant can tolerate a few pest individuals before there's a break point, and then yield loss starts to occur. And the question is always, where on this line are we when we approach a particular soybean field or maize field or whatever crop you're dealing with? So this is important to keep in mind. It doesn't mean if there's one insect there, we will have 1 unit of yield loss. It's a non-linear response. And I want to give you some more examples of soybean. And I show these pictures of the painted lady. We've got so many nice Afrikaans names here, the eendagsrokkie and the loopers and bowworms on soybean. If defoliators do this type of damage on a soybean plant, the action threshold, this was excellent research done in Australia on soybean. They've got the same species that we have. The action threshold is 20 larvae per meter of soybean row. That sounds like a very big number. And nearly everybody would scream for an application of chemistry to kill these worms. But the threshold is 20 larvae per meter row because they eat the leaves. If you look at bollworm on that same soybean crop, it's a pot feeder. Suddenly, the threshold is much lower. It is 2 larvae per meter row. And that is what I say is the IPM way of thinking. We're dealing a vegetative stage phase here. They're defoliating. We know the pest life cycle. The pest may become start to pupate soon. They are very large larvae already, and the threshold is very high. Maybe insecticide applications are not necessary. But if they start attacking pods and flowers, then the situation changes, and we need to think from a different perspective. So soybean is one of those, and groundnut also, where the plant can tolerate a lot of leaf loss before the threshold is reached. And then this is my last example. It's about cutworm. And cutworm has become a huge issue in the grain industry in South Africa over the last 4 or 5 years. And farmers are struggling to manage this pest. And I want to give you another example of how we can integrate what I said, the different pillars of IPM. The 4 pillars are plant resistance, chemical control, cultural control, and biological control. And if we look at cutworm damage or cutworm problems in crops, it's all about the interaction between the insect itself, the climate, the weeds, and the weed management practices. And I do not even mention insecticides here, because the root cause of the cutworm pest problem is management practices which changed over the last 15 years in grain crops and the presence of weeds on fields. So host plant resistance is not relevant here, because BT maize, there will be in future some traits that will kill cutworm, but not really at the moment. So the host plant resistance is not one of the pillars we can use here, but we can use cultural control, managing of weeds, chemical control, and then we cannot deliberately use biocontrol, but biological control is very important during winter months. So 3 of the 4 pillars are relevant here. But I'd like to explain to you the pest management approach to cutworm and thinking of it in terms of IPM. And I need to show this basic life cycle of a cutworm. So the moths lay eggs on the soil or on weeds, not on the crop, because this happens during the winter months. And then the larvae develop to pupa to moths. And this whole process is driven by the presence of weeds on fields and temperature. And in summer, cutworms take 1.5 to 2 months to develop from L1 to L6 larvae. And in winter, this can go up to 120 days. So what is this basic biology, knowledge about those plants, and temperature interactions have to do with integrated management of cutworms? And I want to show you how I approach this after a few years of experience on this. Well, what we know, cutworm is highly polyphagous. And in winter months, in all the grain crops, fields, on the Highveld at least, we've got this, our own Namakwaland, with these weeds that grow. The scaralances and many Senecio, and that is the food for cutworms during the winter. The larvae develop very slowly. So what do we know? We know they are there months before the crop is planted, and that's only then when the cutworms become a problem. So which weed species host cutworm larvae? Nearly every weed species that there are can host a cutworm larvae. The important thing is that plants that have a rosette shape that covers the ground is more suitable as hiding place and food for cutworm larvae than upright plants like this. And that is key to managing this pest eventually, which you will see. So, managing the alternate host plants of this pest is important, and that is one of those things that you need to realize in IPM and understand in IPM as well. So I want to give you one scenario with cutworms of how we think in the IPM way. The weed community is important. The cultivation practices before planting and during winter is important. And then local variation on a farm or in a district in terms of temperatures and rainfall. All those things play a role. And how will that affect our decision to control the pest eventually? And I want to give you this very busy slide to say, to show you how I suggest we should think about integrated pest management here. Chemical control eventually. So, and why I say IPM is knowledge intensive. I indicated earlier that that is the time it takes from egg to moth for cutworms. So, and the red here means warm, it's the end of summer. And here where the flowers are, it's weed flowers. It's again a warm period from spring onwards and the cold winter. So what we know is that in winter, if a moth lays eggs on weeds on the 1st of May, that larva will be a moth again the 1st of September, basically. If the eggs are laid there, the moth will appear in October. Or from here, they will appear 1st of November. So what influences the pest status or the damage that cutworms cause to maize and soybean seedlings in this case, what determines that is how many of them survive the winter. And they survive the winter because of weed presence. So what this boils down to is that the food plant of cutworms needs to be removed just before the planting of maize or soybean happens in spring. So farmers need to keep their fields clean from weeds for a period of 30 to 35 days so that the larvae can die of hunger. And then if they still have larvae, then chemical control should be applied with planting or just after planting if cutworm larvae are observed in the field. So insecticide was not the first position taken here. It's cultural control and biological control and the cultivation of fields that is the solution to managing this pest. And what we find with cutworm in terms of biological control is that approximately 95% of all the cutworm larvae that we have in this time of year are parasitized, but they unfortunately do not die before they start feeding on crop seedlings. So our recommendations in terms of IPM would be, well, plant resistance is of no use here until we get a BT, maize and soybean that kill cutworms. Biological control is active right through the year, natural control. Cultural control should be applied here by removing weeds through disking, etc. And then chemical control is only important here. So these are the two. This is the toolbox of IPM, and we're using different tools to manage the pest. So effective control of cutworm starts with effective weed control. And weed control should be done shortly before planting, because if weeds are present on a field shortly before planting, there's a high risk of cutworm damage, because the field is cultivated, it looks clean, but the larvae can feed on what remains of the weeds until the seedlings emerge, and then the damage is done. So I'm starting to finish off. I want to summarize and say, I showed you that the aim of pest management is not to eradicate the pest, it's just to suppress them to levels below those causing economic injury, and to start moving away from conventional spray programs without checking whether the pest is even present, or without scouting. So the beneficiaries of IPM, of course, it's the farmer, farming more economically, and industry, because in the long run, we are going to run out of options in terms of insecticide chemistry if resistance evolves. And then I want to finish off by saying, I hope I convinced you that IPM is a way to think about pest management. It's not a recipe, it's not a specific method. It is a way of thinking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. We appreciate your insightful presentations. I'd like to ask the audience if they have any questions. I don't see anyone in the chat box, but brilliant presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to give it just, if anyone has a question, if you could just start typing, then we can give it a second. Nope, it looks like we are good to go. Thank you so much, Reed, for a really insightful presentation. Appreciate it, Professor. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful Friday further. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.